Rumours about a new Animal Crossing game potentially releasing in 2026 have been received with excitement, but the question remains, does Katsuya Eguchi's production group, EPD5, have the capacity to make new games in both their two mega-hit franchises, Animal Crossing and Splatoon, at once? If Animal Crossing turns up soon, will Splatoon 4 be put on ice? Or could the two dev teams, who historically have shared large numbers of staff, separate enough to truly stand alone? We'll study which staff are shared, how essential those positions are, and what arrangements are already being put in place to strengthen the development staff. We'll also track the sales history of the game and try to figure out Nintendo's strategy for how they produce them. At the end, we'll look to forecast how likely it is that Nintendo could have not one, but both of these colossal hits ready for the first year or two of their next console generation. But before we dive in, let's catch everyone up, because for two monster hit franchises like Splatoon and Animal Crossing, most people would be forgiven for assuming that Nintendo had two completely independent development teams. But this is not the case. A quick review of the history of the two franchises shows that there is a very distinct pattern over the last decade with Splatoon and Animal Crossing, both of which are developed by the same production group, under the leadership of Katsuya Eguchi. After 2013's New Leaf, the development staff moved to Splatoon, while some remained to focus on 2015's Happy Home Designer. Then after Splatoon in 2015, the team progressed directly to Splatoon 2 in 2017. Some Splatoon 2 staff stayed working on the Octo expansion supporting the main game until July 2019, but Animal Crossing New Horizons released in March 2020. After that, a core group continued on Animal Crossing, developing the Happy Home Paradise DLC for October 2021, while others in the group returned to focus on Splatoon 3. Clearly there are residual staff working on DLC or small spin-offs at any one time, but the main development focus has either been on Animal Crossing or Splatoon, but not, so far, both. This creates a bottleneck in development, and the question is, can Nintendo find a way to uncork the bottle, or have they done so already? This situation isn't unprecedented. Pikmin and Super Mario Bros. Are another example where the shared pool of staff has in the past led to big game delays. In this video, I deep dived the credits to see if those two teams were still, as they once were, joined at the hip. The full video is up here, but in general it appeared that while there was some crossover of staff, looking at the fine detail, it didn't appear they were reliant on those shared staff members to deliver the games. Hence, 2023 boasted Pikmin 4 and Super Mario Bros. Wonder. So, are the Animal Crossing and Splatoon developers ready to graduate to having two fully staffed teams working concurrently in order to deliver both a Splatoon and an Animal Crossing experience early in the life of the next Nintendo console? I'm not going to be looking at credits for vital but not very game-specific work like localization and testing, but I'm really going to focus on the core development staff of Animal Crossing New Horizons compared with Splatoon 2 and Splatoon 3. To start with, let's compare Splatoon 2's development staff with Animal Crossing New Horizons. The first thing that's striking is the number of credits. Splatoon 2 has about a quarter the staff, which makes sense given that it was developed during the dog days of the Wii U. One of its three directors, Yusuke Amano, went on to become the planning supervisor for Animal Crossing New Horizons. Aside from the very key people, the credits have a very comprehensible structure. Instead of a number of individual named and titled roles, it has a few broad teams with large numbers of people listed within each. On the game design team, 3 of the 16 individuals credited for the game design moved to Animal Crossing, though only in very specific roles, network planning and system planning. Given the experience the team had developed in online play from Splatoon, it made perfect sense that they shared this experience out, at least in the early days of the console. Also, only 3 of the 15 people in the sound team crossed over to Animal Crossing, and 3 out of 15 on the programming crew, but these roles were again to do with systems and networks, with one just a special thanks on Animal Crossing, presumably indicating that they helped out on the game, but were very much grounded with the Splatoon team. So far it seems like the teams are already fairly sealed off from each other, but it's the art staff where the crossover becomes obvious. 32 out of the 59 people credited on the Splatoon art team went on to work on Animal Crossing New Horizons. This makes pretty clear what Nintendo's strategy was, at least in 2017 to 2020. These teams require a large number of assets to be created, but only once the game engine is securely developed. So the core team is intact working on the game engine, but a couple of years before each game, the art staff moves to the one entering heaviest production. It's a smart way to deploy resources and frankly to give the mostly relatively young developers some variety in what they're working on. And this does work brilliantly, as long as you don't ever need to have 2 games in development at once. However, for the next system it does make sense to have both Splatoon and Animal Crossing relatively early. Splatoon is a huge hit in Japan especially, and yet it requires a lot of ongoing maintenance. Nintendo's best chance to monetize it effectively without going down the controversial games as a service route is to have a new edition every few years and hope to transition most of the player base to their newest entry, allowing them to shut down their older servers in due course. Meanwhile, Animal Crossing was a huge hit on 3DS, but absolutely titanic numbers were delivered by Animal Crossing New Horizons on the Switch, which really changed the game on the franchise. The choice to release it at the end of 2019, albeit eventually delayed to 2020, seemed clearly calculated to take advantage of the release of the Switch Lite, as this was a more affordable option for people to buy multiple consoles for, which they would need in order to have multiple islands. I still think that releasing Animal Crossing to time with the cheaper, more handheld version of the next system, perhaps due 2027 or so, makes a lot of sense, but when you have such a titanic property as Animal Crossing, would they want to wait potentially 2 or 3 years in order to re-establish it? Ongoing support being ditched for New Horizons after just 18 months felt like a shame, but if they were gearing themselves up to do a more comprehensive version on the next console that would span the whole console's life and potentially involve multiple upgrades, I could see that as being a very compelling proposition for them, and especially if, as per the recent rumours, there are other ties they would like to make with Animal Crossing, such as television shows, or indeed films, theme parks, or even Amiibo. 2020 showed the potential of Animal Crossing, but it's going to be the next game that really shows just how high this franchise can soar. Okay then, it all comes down to whether or not Splatoon 3 can stand alone, separate from Animal Crossing. First of all, it should be said that like Animal Crossing New Horizon, the Splatoon 3 staff is significantly larger. Looking at the specific roles though, firstly, we can see the number of game designers has increased massively from Splatoon 2, up to 35, of whom 7 were also on Animal Crossing New Horizon. However, of these 7, most are again from the networking and system group, including a number of the same names that we saw crossing over before. And there's one person, Tomoaki Tsuji, who was only credited on Animal Crossing in the more peripheral role of planning support. The sound team seems more integrated than before, with 5 of the 11 members of the sound staff crossing over, but it's curious that the number of people working on sound in Splatoon 3 actually went down from Splatoon 2. Perhaps because they had enough existing material to rework from previous games, or perhaps because staff members were pulled elsewhere. The programming team also shared 9 Animal Crossing staffers, but out of a total of 43, nearly 3 times the size of Splatoon 2, meaning they could in theory make a Splatoon 2 size programming team using only Splatoon 3 exclusive staff if they wanted to. Okay though, crunch time. Art. It's not the end of the world for these departments to share some staff, but the sheer number of people who went from Splatoon 2 to Animal Crossing clearly shows why we've experienced this alternating cycle between the two franchises. And here, there are only 14 shared credits between Splatoon 3 and Animal Crossing out of a whopping total of 106. Nearly double the total number of people were credited on art on Splatoon 3 compared to Splatoon 2. And of course, these staff numbers are only as of 2022. We're now 2 years on, so presumably the number of people involved will only increase and the teams will become ever more established. Look, none of this says that Nintendo is necessarily going to move from its cycle of alternating Splatoon and Animal Crossing. What's clear from the data is that if they wanted to separate the teams, they absolutely could, based on the staffing numbers. But should they? It's a good idea to separate out releases of major franchises after all, but then, equally, Nintendo games are designed to have long selling windows. Splatoon 3's sales numbers appear to drop quite quickly. Since its launch, Splatoon 3 hasn't appeared in any reports suggesting its post-launch sales were rather modest. But then again, the nature of the game benefits from new editions being released regularly. On the other hand, Animal Crossing has remained a real evergreen, selling over 3 million copies in 2023, and while it never again matched its explosive first few months, it remains firmly ahead of all its rivals except of course for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. This is the kind of game it's worth having on your system early. So, to a forecast. I think having a Splatoon title or an Animal Crossing game within the first 12 months of the new system is a 90% probability. I don't necessarily think having both in the space of a year would especially move the needle for Nintendo when we also expect 3D Mario, Mario Kart and possibly other major titles. But within the first 24 months of a new console, is it likely that we could see both titles? Time was, I would have put this as a low chance, but now I'm inclined to say that it is looking much more likely. My only caution is no longer the distribution of the dev team between the two franchises, but simply that these games take quite a long time to make, and it's always important to factor in time for things to be perfected. Time that Nintendo has shown time and time again that it is willing to take to get things right. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to check out my similar video on the Pikmin and 2D Mario devs EPD10, or look at some of my other deep dives. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.